Jim Adkins joins me on Jacky Road Studios this week. That is Mr. Bungle. The song is called Raping My Mind. You've really got everybody's attention with that clip, Jim. How you going?
I'm going well. How are you going?
I'm good. I've got to say, for everybody who's bought in an intro song to the show so far, this one definitely surprised me the most.
Oh yeah? Why?
I'm not super familiar with Mr. Bungle. I know that it's Mike Patton's the lead singer, and I'm a big fan of Mike Patton, but I don't know. It's just it's a bit more aggressive than my personal taste in music. Is that the kind of thing you'd listen to at home?
Sometimes there's a place for that, for sure. I grew up listening to a lot of like thrash and hardcore and metal, and when it's executed well, there's a special place for it for me.
What could a song like that do for you? I know I personally use the heaviest stuff I would listen to is like Shape of Punk to Come by Refused or the first Transplants album, right? And if I'm in a fug, I'll go out running and I'll put something like that on. Where would you listen to that song?
I would listen to that. I would probably listen, there's a couple different ways to listen to it. You could listen to it in one of those situations. There's enough aggression to it that it would kind of, shock you out of whatever funk you're in. You could listen to it when you are doing something that demands a lot of physical activity. But you could also listen to it in an academic way because it's very technical.
Yeah.
And that's really what surprised me about it is people that can shred not all the time produce something that is just has that unquantifiable yes to it.
Yeah.
It's like if you can do it, there's a tendency I think that a lot of people have that it's not interesting unless you do it. But this song in particular, you can tell they all are insane shredders. It's not often Mike Patton is in a group of musicians that are where he's not far and away the most technical shredder. Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
But I mean, in this group, it's not only as everybody shredding, but they're hitting all the points for me where it's just this yes, but it's also kind of taking the piss out of shredding in a way, with the,
yeah.
It's almost cartoony. It's like the most demented cartoon ever, but in order to play it, you have to have a PhD in thrash metal, basically.
So how often do you find yourself listening to music academically versus just listening to music for fun?
I don't think I can help listening to things not academically.
Does it suck some of the fun out of it then?
Yes. It does. Well, I don't know. Because I don't have any other me to compare it to.
Yeah. But I guess when you listen to music for the first time growing up, before you had a great understanding of what technically was going on, and you just listened to music for, the excitement of listening to it for the first time.
I would take issue with that. I have a great understanding of technically what's going on, but I do know when something's hard. I can tell when someone has put in their time. I might not be able to follow along and know the exact theoretical decisions behind some of the choices they make, but I can tell when something's hard, and I can tell when someone's put in the work to get there.
And do you know Mike Patton?
No, I don't know Mike Patton.
Do you know much about... So when I just had a preliminary search of Mr. Bungle, I came across this feud they had with the Red Hot Chili Peppers, where the Chili Peppers were keeping them from being on festival bills all across Europe, even at the famous festival we've got here in Australia that you've played before, the Big Day Out. They got them kicked off the Big Day Out lineup. Do you know any of the backstory of that, or it's irrelevant?
I don't know any of the backstory behind that.
And would you say Jimmy Eat World has a feud with any bands?
No, not really. We're sort of like we're sort of like the kid that can float between the clicks and doesn't get hassled too much by any of them.
And what bands would you say you're close with? Like, if you had to go on tour with another band tomorrow, you can choose anybody. Who are Jimmy Eat World's best friends?
Oh man, that's really hard. We have so many like good friends in other bands. Some of them aren't really active right now. Like the Promise Ring is one of them. We're buddies with AFI. It's always fun hanging out with them. God, I don't know. Like we get along with everybody, really.
And where would you be if you were allowed to be on tour at the moment? Where would you be in the world? Because I know you had to cancel Australian dates.
Yeah, right now we'd be in Europe for festivals, probably.
And will you have to these Australian dates? I saw. Were you doing like just the like staying away from the east coast of Australia, like Fremantle, Adelaide, and not coming to Melbourne and Sydney?
No, we were doing. God, what was the festival's name? I've sort of blocked out all the things that have gone away from in a traumatic. Like it didn't happen. It wasn't there.
I think it would have been Download Festival is probably the one.
Yeah. Yeah, we were playing Download, but we weren't doing any headlining gigs in Melbourne or Sydney, but we were doing the Download.
And what happens now that, like, when you get a whole lot of free time that you weren't expecting, what do you end up doing with it?
Well, I mean, free time I wasn't expecting in this situation turned into trying to put together an idea that I've been putting off for a really long time, which is talking to people about songwriting for a podcast format.
Yeah, I mean, the listeners of this show will be familiar with it because I've been singing its praises already, but Pass Through Frequencies is the name of your podcast. I love it. It sounds like I was chatting to you before we came online and you said you were pretty much doing it all yourself, booking the interviews, recording it, editing it.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a friend help me out with editing. Actually, my buddy who helped co-direct the 555 video edited the Steve Aoki one, but everything else has been me filming, editing, booking, producing.
And it's all people you know already? Do you have any plans to reach out to people you don't know?
Yeah, definitely. It's people I have some kind of history with so far. You know, maybe not people I hang out with all the time, but definitely colleagues, work friends that I see every once. Yeah, work colleagues, kind of. But everybody. There's a real strong connection I feel with people in the music industry now because everyone's in the same boat. You know, everyone has really trying to figure out what to do with their lives and how to stay afloat, and that's really bringing people together in a, I mean, not a physical way, but it's bringing people together like mentally, emotionally, I feel. And
are you, for the first few episodes I did this podcast, I was really brutal on like editing and like taking out every time I said and every time there was a like awkward pause and trying to be really strict. And so there's heaps of cuts all through the first episode. And now I'm starting to get more lazy with it or just be more relaxed with that. Have you found that, or like when you're editing them yourself?
I'm learning lots of things for sure about video. I mean, that's another reason I wanted to try to do this, and I wanted to try to make it filmed rather than just audio because I wanted to learn about that. I wanted to learn about video editing. I have a lot of ideas for things, but it's tricky to communicate that to other people when I don't have that language. You know, like if we're trying to make a video for a song or something, or we have an idea for how just anything visually with what our music should look like. Having a basic language in the video side of things to communicate that to people would be great. If not, just do it ourselves and make it, you know? So there's that. I'm also horrified with how often I say like and you know.
Yeah, but I think people are more, you're going to be your worst critic with that stuff. I think when I watch it, I don't notice any mistakes, for want of a better word, that you do during the interviews. But I know what it's like to be on the other side and to be really technical about it and trying to be strict on cutting all those out.
It was horrifying at first, but now I'm able to say, "Oh yeah, hey, that's Jim." Like it's not me.
Yeah,
I'm editing it. Kind of like comping vocals. You know what I mean? You're choosing takes, but you're not. If you had to listen to yourself just talk, it's kind of it's unnerving and it's cringy. But if you're thinking about it for like a performance, like if you're comping a vocal, and which I'm assuming that's how you do your stuff too. Like you'd sing like a line a couple times, and you'd take like the beginning of the phrase that sounds good from take 1 and add it to the end of phrase from take 3.
Yep.
That's for people who don't do that regularly. That's called comping. You make a composite, and that's similar to what I've been able to think of for making the video edits now.
Yep.
Like it's just a surgical kind of thing. I'm becoming more professional, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is probably too much delving into the behind the scenes of how you make it for a regular person, but I'm just interested because we're doing sort of similar things. How long would you record, say, the first one I watched was the first episode with Mark Hoppus from Blink-182. How long did you record with him for, and then how much gets left on the editing floor?
I try to keep interviews to about an hour. Mm-hmm. And the final episode will be between 45 and an hour, depending on what goes down.
Yeah. So there's not huge amounts of stuff coming out then?
No, not really. Just, things, what I've discovered happens a lot of the time is you'll ask a question and the other person, or they'll ask a question. And right away, your brain just fires off a bunch of things like, oh yeah. And then you start talking your way through the thing you want to say, and then you realize you don't really understand what you want to say, so you talk around the thing. But then, and sometimes you land the plane. Sometimes you land at a different airport.
And you pretended that that's the airport that you were trying to hit all along.
Yeah, so you got to kind of make sense of that. Like maybe you cut out. Maybe you just jump in mid-flight to the new airport and forget about the where you were trying to land the plane earlier. It just depends, and that could take up. You could lose minutes that way. But I try to keep it conversational unless there's an obvious thing that just sounds weird or is redundant or lots of likes and you-knows.
Yeah,
it must be weird. It must be weird it must be weird if you're not an English-speaking person, trying to learn conversational English and hearing someone talk and say like, "What? Why is all this like? And why am I supposed to know this?"
Yeah. I definitely wouldn't recommend this podcast either to new English speakers on how to properly use the language.
Yeah, neither mine.
And then the other thing I love about your YouTube channel, which people can find, it's just called Jimmy Eat World on YouTube, is and you do people who listen to this podcast, especially the in-between episodes where I break down how I make the song each week, is you're essentially doing some of that as well. I watched the clip where you went through the making of Surviving, which is the title track off the newest album. For someone like me, that's just like, it's a gold mine to come across a YouTube channel like this.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I'm not sure how often I'll post those, but usually on Wednesdays I've been putting up kind of behind the scenes things with how I work on my own or with the band here in the Jacky Road Studio. And since Futures, which would have been in 2004-ish, I've taken copies of the multi-track sessions from all of our albums.
Yep.
So I can solo up a specific element if I want and talk about that. Because there's a lot of things that go into creating a recording that
Yeah.
Maybe only you get a slight taste of when it's served. It's like a hint of this element, but you spent a day getting that sound just right to fit in just there, and it's really low. And some of those things are really cool to bring up and just hear unadorned again.
So that would be cool for fans of the band to know. Will you go back through old albums as well and pull them apart in the same way on the YouTube channel?
Maybe. Right now I'm just going with things that jump out at me as interesting. Mm-hmm. Right now I feel it's really important to just chase ideas and not set too many goals for myself, but just move where something interesting feels. So I might remember something about recording, like I remembered the story about recording 23 when we took the string synth part and ran it through a computer program to translate MIDI into charts. And it had, I guess like at the end of the song, I was just holding down the key because I didn't know how long I'd have it. So you have like this MIDI note that's written for like 64 bars tied together. And we didn't even check that. We made charts out of it, brought it to the studio, asked session players to sight read it. And then so we get to the end of the song and they're just reading what we what the MIDI program transcribed, and they're just holding out the 64 bar tie.
It's like Ron Burgundy having to read whatever's on the teleprompter. The strings players will just read what's exactly on the sheet.
Yeah, exactly. So that I remember that being funny. So I did an episode about that.
I love how much you're involved and like you get excited about the process of like, and that's one of the reasons I started this podcast, is to learn more about the recording software, because I've never really done that before. Where do you strike a balance between like the artist who has to wait for the muse to visit them to write a great song versus the person who gets nitty gritty with the software and the plugins and the mix and all of that extra stuff?
That is a good question, because you can definitely get lost on one side or the other and never bring the two together to finish something.
Yeah.
When I started teaching myself, I feel really fortunate. Well, see, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Like the brain gets going, you start in on something, and then you realize you're talking.
Yeah.
And then you have to put sense to that. So after I collect myself here,
I'll give you room.
Okay, just go to a spot, center yourself. Okay. I was really fortunate because when we were making records, I got to work with Mark Trombino, who's a producer, engineer, musician person, and he's very technical, very computer savvy, very just curious and interested in taking technology and using it. So I got to just watch Pro Tools happening to a great level that I don't think many people did back then. Like as I was learning how to make records, I was watching a master work to make the record with Pro Tools. So I knew what was possible when I sat down to teach myself the software, but I had to fumble my way through on how to do it, how to get there on my own. Like I saw what you could do, but I didn't understand how to do it. And it took me like a couple of months to get that down, but nothing great creatively happened in those couple of months because I was just going. Like I think you need to understand the rules and be good at it before you can bring a sense of musicianship to it.
This is the problem I've had with learning it, that I guess I didn't expect coming up against, is because I'm so slow at using the programs and the plugins and getting used to it, is that it really sucks a little bit of the fun and the pace out of making a song.
Yeah, and then you get sidetracked into the video game aspect of it and just start tweaking on stuff because you discover it and forget. You forget your idea because you're like, what's this do? Oh man, I can automate this. Sweet. Yeah. No, it's tricky. Well, I mean, those will in time you'll discover what works for you, and you'll have a good sense of what you can do with the rig that you have, and it'll just become part of your thinking. Like when you pick up a guitar, is that your main instrument, guitar?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
You don't have to think anymore about like what effect pedal you want to use or what kind of amp setting you want to have when you have an idea. You just go and pick it up and do it. Eventually that's how working with computer recording happens. You just sort of go.
So when with a final mix of an album, what you're doing in that Jacky Road World studio, are you just making demos in there and then you take it still to be professionally mixed and finalized, or is that are you at the level where you're doing that stuff?
It depends on the project. Like we've made records here. We've made a good portion of every record here since Chase This Light. Actually, since Futures, really. We started working here when we were beginning to make Futures, and slowly more and more finished album pieces have been made here. We made all of Chase This Light here. We made all of Invented here. We made most of Surviving here. We did drums somewhere else, but I mean, we can make records here.
And where is here? Because as we were trying to figure out the time difference that we're both in,
right.
And I was trying to find out where you are, it looks like you're in the middle of the desert.
Yes. I'm in the middle of the desert in southwestern United States in Arizona.
Yep.
Right now I'm in Tempe, Arizona, which is maybe like toward the center south part of the state.
And is it a city, or are you like properly rural on your own?
Oh no, it's like Phoenix, Tempe, Scottsdale. It's a big megalopolis.
Oh, okay, you're part of Phoenix, right? Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And does it change? Do you think it changes the way you write and make music, the location of where you are?
It can just to shake things up sometimes, to be somewhere else, forcing you to concentrate on what you're doing, or maybe forcing you to think differently about things just because your environment's different. I mean, your environment can play a role in it. I don't know if me being here, just the geographical aspect of where I am right now. I mean, it's kind of, I don't have any windows in here. I mean, I could be in Antarctica.
Be anywhere.
It doesn't matter.
And what do you do for like this project with this podcast that I'm doing has actually been a good way to force myself to put out music every couple of weeks. What do you do for moments of writer's blocks or getting over hurdles where you feel like you're not being creative or you're not in the zone to make music?
I start podcasts.
Yeah. And do you feel like that?
Kidding.
Do you feel like it's helped you make music, or do you feel like it's been a distraction? So it's like, well, I don't have to be making music because I've got this other project that I'm working on. It
takes up a lot of time.
Yeah.
Because I'm still in that phase where I'm learning I'm like you. I'm learning the software and learning how to navigate my way around things. And so that takes up a lot of time. Maybe one day that'll get shortened down and I'll just be able to kind of execute without thinking or, fumbling around.
But I would say what's in there in the podcast, because it's purely a podcast about songwriting. It's very, again, for me, it was just like a gold mine to find. But so there's heaps of little gems in there from the different people you're talking to about ideas of how they approach music or how they approach a blank page. Yeah. Does that ever inspire you to go and try something different?
Not yet. But I mean, that aspect of that's really what I'm trying to get at in the podcast is there's a point where somebody's got to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah.
And that heavy lifting is you deciding for yourself if what you've just done is good enough. And that's really hard. That's really hard sometimes because like that decision point can happen earlier and earlier in the stage of things to where you're just paralyzed.
Yeah.
You know,
So what kind of feedback loops do you use? Like, is it other people to get an idea of whether something that you're working on is good or worth keep working on?
I know what I have to do, man. It just sucks. It just sucks.
So what is okay, of a whole songwriting process start to finish, what's the easiest part for you? What's the tedious part? Or does it change?
The easiest part is the beginnings that's when the least self-censorship, that's when the least self-judgment happens.
Yeah. Well, because there's no jeopardy on something, I guess, when you're first starting out, because it could just be an idea that gets discarded.
It's like that. It's like a different version of what I just said about, ooh, I have an idea. Here's what I want to say. You're just going to reflexively act, and then you catch up with yourself and you become self-aware. And that's the point where the real battle, that's where the tedious part comes in. When you're just chasing that idea, when you're just going with the flow of things, and you have that balance of being, a conduit for the idea, but also present just enough to direct it and not let it just be completely open. That's the best part, when you're just flying through that phase. When you have to become self-aware and start the editing, start bringing in the editing aspect of it earlier on, like writing the lyrics, that sucks. That's my least favorite part.
Oh, interesting. Right. Okay. And what stage will you do that? Will you get a full music? Like, will you get the music with a melody that doesn't have any words, and then put in the lyrics as the last thing, or you try and work on them simultaneously?
More often than not, I'll just go until the song is completely put together as a complete song.
Wow. Okay.
But no final lyrics. Like I won't even start something unless I have an idea for melody and phrasing.
Yep.
Doesn't matter how cool.
What do you use in the time being? Do you put in just gibberish lyrics, or just put in like la la las? What do you put in there until you have the lyrics?
I'll put in a scat vocal of just whatever, trying to sing the melody line in a non-lyrical way. And usually you make choices about vowel and consonants when you're scatting like that based on, I don't know, like how you sing. Maybe sometimes it's easier to make a note when you're approaching like a sort of like kind of vowel sound. So that's what ends up on the higher parts. And then later on, when you're trying to...
So does it get tricky to write lyrics, because then you're not really writing whatever you want? You got like, oh well, at the minute 15 mark, it's got to be an A sounding vowel.
No, it's not. I don't know. I mean that changes. It just depends, man. It could go any number of ways that way.
Well, the podcast is called Pass Through Frequencies. I've recommended it on the show before, but I recommend it again. And any of the stuff under the Jimmy Eat World banner on YouTube, I find really interesting as well. I want to ask you about coming to Australia. From what I could find on setlist.fm, the first time you were here in Melbourne was 2001, and you played at a place called the Punters Club, which people would know now as Bimbo's Deluxe, and it's only a block away from where I'm recording this now. Do you have any memories of your first time touring here?
Yeah, man. I remember a lot of it. I was really surprised about how far away I was from home, but yet how not different it felt.
Yep. Okay.
It's kind of, I mean, when we came to Australia for the first time, we really hadn't been a lot of places. We've been to Europe a little bit, but I think we went to Australia even before we went to the UK. I've been to the UK with my family, but with the band, I don't know. I can't remember that.
Yeah.
But I just remember like it. I mean, right away, I knew it was awesome. And since then, it's always been one of my favorite places to come and play.
And it was I guess the places you played here, from what I can see, the first time you were here, like small, relatively small venues for what compared to what you'd play when you came back again, in 2003 and after that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was our first time there, man. You got to pay your dues.
Yeah, no, I'm not. I didn't mean that as an insult. I just meant, it's interesting to think of this pub around the corner from my house as Jimmy Eat World playing, in a tiny little room there.
We play in tiny rooms all the time.
Mm-hmm. How does it compare, like playing tiny rooms, to big festivals, or to, have you played stadium shows and stuff like that as well?
It's all good. It's totally all good. All of it's good. It's good because we're really fortunate that we have those options, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not all just one thing. I think it would be lame if you were just playing arenas.
So where do you play? Where do you do a small show now, and how do you do it without it being overcrowded?
Are we talking now, or like now as in the last 2 years now?
Now is in the last 2 years.
Yeah. I guess it's just up to the promoter and the fire marshal on how many people are, if it's overcrowded or not. But yeah,
I know bands sometimes do don't even say who's playing, like play under a different name.
Oh.
So do you ever do anything like that?
We'll just do that in town here sometimes. Like we might put up tickets for sale like that day,
Mm-hmm.
or the day before. We do gigs like that all the time around here. There's we're friends with all the people that run clubs and promote shows, and it's really easy for us to do. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we never moved up from here, is because that art infrastructure is just so wired now. Like we know what to do anything we want. It's a little bit daunting to have to move somewhere else and do all that over again. So, yeah, we can do whatever we want here. It's great.
And what, in terms of Australian bands, I know you put out a split record with one of my favourite bands when I was growing up, from Perth, Jebediah. Which Australian bands are you still in contact with or friends with?
Yeah, I keep in contact with the youth group guys. Like Cameron from Community Radio, I think is his latest project. Like those guys are cool. I think the Atlas Genius people I see around every once in a while. I don't keep in contact with as many people as I should. I need more Australian friends.
I made a mistake of the very first festival I went to was Big Day Out 2003, which Jimmy Eat World played at, and I had the choice of seeing Jimmy Eat World versus The Living End, and The Living End was another one of my favorite bands growing up, and I chose The Living End. Probably regretted it because I saw them 10 times over the next 5 years, because you could see them every 6 months in Australia. What are your memories of playing the Big Day Out?
The big Australian festivals are amazing. There's nothing like it, really. I imagine it's sort of like being on the early Lollapalooza tours that went around the United States, where the same group of people, big groups of people, like big bands in the same like kind of group of people just move around the country. You get to really hang out with people and make friends, and everybody's awesome. You're bumming me out, man.
Well, I mean, the big COVID or not COVID, the Big Doubt is sadly no longer a running music festival here. And what do you miss? Like, you sound sad that you're not out there touring. What is it about touring that you miss at the moment, and that is making you sad?
You're always excited about new material, and we put out a new album last October. So this was the time, like we were maybe 4 days away from heading to Australia when the world locked down, and I was really looking forward to that because that was the beginning of the bulk of showing people in person this new album that we made.
Yeah.
And just, traveling has always been, even as a kid, traveling was something that I was just excited about. I just really enjoyed. And to be able to do that, but also play music is just, it's absolutely incredible. The thing about touring and the thing about playing music touring is that you instantly fall into a group of people that you probably hang out with anyway if you live there. Like-minded, aesthetically similar tastes, just cool people. And, every day you're hanging out with new people that would be your friends if you lived in town. And it's amazing. It's just I don't know.
And I mean, you're coming to Australia to do the Download Festival, but if you're planning a tour that is just that you're headlining and you get to pick the dates, do you prefer to get as many cities and locations in as possible, or do you like to keep it more spread out so that you can enjoy the places that you're visiting?
We try to balance that. I mean, mostly it's based on protecting the show itself. There is one reason that you're actually there, and that's to play your music. So what the decisions we make are based on how do we keep that the best it can be. So we won't book more than 4 or 5 shows in a row just to give singing voices a rest. We'll try not to keep travel so insane that you're not sleeping well. But we do try to schedule days off in nice places when we can, but it's a balance.
Yeah, and I'm honestly loving the most recent album, Surviving. Do you have a favorite track off that album?
Thanks. I don't know. I really like the title track, Surviving. That's been the song lately. It kind of changes around. I think the Surviving the song is really cool.
So did you get a chance to play many of these songs live, or I mean, at the end of last year, I imagine you got to tour it a little bit.
Yeah, we got 27 shows in. We got 27 shows where we played some of the record, and that was fun.
And what's a normal year? How many dates would you do in a normal year?
Like 160.
Gee, so it's more, essentially half the year. Like, there's a good chance that you're playing on any given night.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've really, really enjoyed the new album, and while listening to it, noticed that the front cover of the album is the word Surviving, and it's made up into a maze between the letters. Have you traced the maze and found your way from end to end?
It's a solvable maze, but I've never tried. I've never been so bored on tour sitting around with our own record that I tried it.
Well, I have. It's actually quite an easy maze to complete.
Yeah, it's not. We should have come up with more, traps. You can't call your record Surviving and put a maze on the front and make it so easy.
How much input do you have in terms of like art direction and stuff, or does that get done? You just worry about the music and that gets done by another department. 100%
involvement.
What can't be 100% if you didn't know how to get out the maze?
For this album to come out, I have to be able to. I have to know each turn in that maze.
Left, right, left.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Okay, write this down. straight, right, left, right. This is how I want the maze.
But that's cool. So you do have like, is it the band that does it together, or do you personally give direction on how you want the artwork to look?
It's sort of a process. Like we like anything, you brainstorm, you throw out ideas. Some things get traction, some things hit dead ends. You switch gears. It is interesting because you're making probably the most esoteric decisions and having to verbalize them and having to communicate them so that other people can understand and add on to that or interpret that. And it's a little bit of a process, but in the end, you end up somewhere that feels like a collaboration.
Now, I want to also, I bet you get asked about the song in the middle all the time, but I want to ask you about it only because it's such, especially here in Australia, it's such a crossover hit that I broadcast on a station that plays dominates in 80s pop music with a little bit of 90s pop music, but we still play Jimmy Eat World, the middle. How is that song, how did that song, break away into a different area where my parents would know it versus all the other stuff that you put out? And were you surprised that it became that way?
Oh, I have no idea why it broke out that big. I was totally surprised by it. For me, it was not exactly the most. I had no idea it would break out like that. On the Bleed American album, I felt like it was okay. Like it was just this song that like felt good and just really nailed what it wanted to be for the type of song it was, and I didn't really think about it beyond that. I think when something comes together easily and quickly, you might assign less value to it than something that you've really had to dig deep and solve puzzles to make. And the middle was something that happened pretty quickly. It's not the type of song that needs to be overthought.
Yep.
It just is what it is. And it wasn't a song that you had to labor over for how are you going to record it or like it just happened.
And what did it do for the band? How did the middle change what Jimmy Eat World was before it came out?
Yeah, it changed everything. It changed like a lot with how we operate. I mean, we went from like small clubs to like half arenas in a year because of it. It's like, oh, I guess we have to figure out how to do this now.
And do you feel a sense that you have to play it at every show? Have you played it at every show?
No, I mean we play it almost every show. But there's like here's a song that you wrote that anytime you do play it, it gets a really good reaction. People have fun. Why would you not play that?
Yeah.
Why would you not play that? Like it's everyone really freaks out and has a good time when you play this song. Why would you not do that? I don't know.
Yeah.
I never understood bands that like kind of shy away from their hits.
All right, Jim. Well, thank you for joining the podcast and coming on Jacky Road Studios. I implore everybody to check out Pass Through Frequencies and the Jimmy Eat World YouTube channel, the new album Surviving. Before you go, I want to ask you one favor, which I'll just edit out if you reject, but because I do write a song at the end of each episode, would you lend a simple guitar riff that takes you 2 seconds to come up with, or a simple vocal la 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 after we've finished recording that I can incorporate into the song in some small way?
Sure. I'll figure out something. I'll send you, it'll be a surprise. I'll send you something and you can try to work it in. How about that?
I love that. All right. Well, I'll start this week's song from "You'll Be the Starting Point." Whatever you send me will dictate what the rest of the song becomes.
Oh man, you don't have any idea what door you've just opened with that.
Is it going to sound something like this?
Maybe. Maybe, man. Yeah, I'm going to test out your thrash chops.
No, don't. I can't keep up with that. Jim Adkins, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jack.
No worries. Bye-bye.